Hi, and welcome to Convosessions with Sherri. I'm Sherri, and today our special guest is Patton, and he is a leadership coach, and he has lots of experience with leadership because he was in the military. So you want to just introduce yourself, give us a bit of background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sherri, for having me. So I spent basically my entire adult life in the military until 5 years ago. I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point right out of high school, pretty intense leadership training there, and then was commissioned as an officer into the U.S. Army Infantry. So after a couple years of training, my first job at 24 was 35 to 40 infantry soldiers, most of which were older than me, almost all of which had more experience than me, but you're put in charge. So,
Yeah.
uh, and then trained them for 12 months. And 12 months later, I was in Iraq for 14 months, ended up getting a second platoon, a scout and sniper platoon. Then I went to U.S. Army Special Forces, got selected there, and spent the rest of my time commanding U.S. Army Green Berets Special Forces teams in places like Afghanistan, throughout the Middle East. So I was an officer for 10 years. So, and, I kind of take a lot of those lessons with me into the civilian side when I transitioned over. But, I was really interested actually to see like, all right, how much of this translates over? So I think when you're in the military, you're in this system and you're like, oh man, look at all this cool stuff we're doing. And you think I've got this thing down. And then when you move over, you realize, okay, there are great lessons here, but the private side, the civilian side, is a lot different for a lot of different
Yeah.
reasons. And so I went and got my MBA and started my first company, and now I'm teaching leaders at all levels, about self leadership and then organizational leadership, and trying to kind of combine those two worlds of mine.
Awesome. All right. So what's one big difference then? Is it that people have like free will and they're like, I'm not doing that. I don't feel like it.
Yeah, that is part of it, right? I think there's a few. I would say the biggest is, and I'm not speaking about particular people who are right, or just generally,
Yes. Yes.
especially when you have big organizations, all these different types. Is in the military, everyone is mission focused. So mission comes first,
Okay.
right? You're not on a patrol getting ready to do a raid and then somebody's like, hey, actually I'm at overtime now, so I'm going to go ahead and go home. Right? That's not a thing. It's you do the job comes first and you're done when you're done.
Yeah.
Not, here are these conditions that I will do this work for you and you're going to compensate me. So, while you're still compensating soldiers and they're getting paid and all those things, all that's really secondary. Everybody's really focused on the mission. Now, if you're in especially a small, great team, that sort of startup world, that founder sort of entrepreneurial world, or high-powered team, you can see that. But when you're building a company, people are not there. They don't have that same sort of focus and drive and commitment, to the purpose of this company the way the founder is. So you have to find new incentives and make sure that you're aligning those personal incentives and financial incentives and culture and all those things to try to get the result and the effect out of those people in a way that you can just say, hey guys, this is what we're doing. And that's really all you got to do. So everybody's already on board.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's probably the number one thing.
Yeah, I know. With once I opened my own business, I was like, okay, listen, I love this business. Like, it's another kid. It's my baby. No one else cares about it as much as me. So if I could get an employee that cares like 80% as much as me, or 70%, that's a win.
Yeah,
so, but
absolutely.
again, a lot of it is the culture, is kind of a little bit of purpose behind it. And that is tricky sometimes to put across. I know there's been times where it's just been more like, hey, here's what you need to do, ... And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not working towards like a really nice culture, and it's becoming a little more like boss employee situation. Whereas if everyone feels like they're contributing and on a team, it works a lot better. So that's something I try and remind myself of. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult, but I know from my work experience, when I've been included in the process, when I've been giving the freedom to like input, I am a way better employee than just like, hey, here's the list, get it done or else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. So there's two things you brought up, and I I literally wrote an article on this, did some videos I just put up today, sort of on, hey, as leaders, we can get bogged down with the minutia and the to-do list, and we got to do this and that, and what about you've got culture and branding and marketing, you got like all these just things going through your head and processes and clients, and as you grow, what I really focus on is there's really two primary jobs, right? Because just like your salesperson has a role to make this system work, the head leader, the founder, you have a particular role in this system, and it's not to do everything, right? Because we can delegate and do all these things, but there's two things you can never delegate, and you brought up both of them, which is really cool. Which one is creating the proper culture, right? Like that's solely your job as a leader. No one else is going to do that. Everyone's going to follow you. That's one thing that's really interesting, and you see it, especially with smaller companies, bigger companies too. And I saw it in the military all the time. Is that over a short period of time, you'll see just the culture and the attitude of that group will mimic that leader, right? If they're high energy, if they're positive, all of a sudden that's kind of just how everyone starts behaving. And if they're draconian, kind of, you're going to do that, and you're going to, everybody else will start to go that way. So it needs to be a deliberate step to, to establish the culture that you want from the onset initially. And that's done through, proper organizational design, proper financial incentives, proper recruiting, and really laying out, this is the purpose of the company. This is our mission. These are our values. This is why we're here, and drilling that into people's heads. So it becomes more than just a paycheck to people.
Yeah.
And then the second phase of that culture is using that emotional intelligence to get the most out of that system of people and leading them and being able to, because you can't lead everyone the same, right? If you're going to maximize, which in my view, that's the job of the leader, is to maximize the potential and the output of every individual into a collective effort. And that means you can't treat everybody the same, because people are going to respond differently. So that's culture, and you tapped on it. We can't delegate that. And the second thing you brought up is when you said, when I'm brought into the process, when I'm brought into planning, and the second thing is make a decision, right? Indecisiveness can cripple any organization. And you, as a leader, you can't delegate, that primary decision-making process for strategic things or big projects down to anybody. Like literally everybody else, you can you can find someone to do every other function.
Yeah.
You just do those two things. And so, we don't probably have time, but I go through sort of a framework that I use for problem solving. But the main thing is bringing as many people into that process, because I think way too many leaders, especially I think new leaders, that maybe either their company grew really fast or they've been put in sort of a new level, is they do what I call like office or desk planning, right? It's like they get, hey, we need to do this from somebody in the organization or client. And then they sit down at their desk, work late, burn the midnight oil. They figure out the plan. The next morning, everybody shows up and like, all right, guys, this is what we're doing. As opposed to bring everybody in, hey, this is the problem. This is our mission. This is what we need to do. And then leading the team through an actual constructive problem solving process and getting everybody's input. And I think that is really a key skill that separates good from great leaders, is the ability to lead a team of people through an effective planning process and solve a complex problem. I think that's something that you'll see even senior leaders in corporate America struggle with. And I think it's something that doesn't get taught enough. I don't think there's really that many people that know how to teach it. And so but it does when you bring people in, get that sort of buy-in and get people to really get behind what you're trying to do, not just, all right, well, I'm going to do my part as long as I'm getting paid well.
Yeah, exactly. So have you seen leadership really, what's your view of leadership with this? So we're all in a global problem, the COVID-19, we're all in quarantine or lockdown, we're stuck inside, our teams are working remotely. How have you seen leaders respond to this? Because it was a crisis that all of a sudden everyone had to move quickly. Like it's not like in 3 weeks, you guys start putting processes in place. it was just so quick. And I'm looking at some companies and I'm like, you pivoted quick, you're smart, you're like on the, and I'm looking at others, and I'm like, guys, you're still open. Like, what's happening? You can't complain anymore. It's been 4 weeks. Like, let's move, let's move. So
Yeah.
what's your view on that?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things here. And in terms of being able to transition quickly, it really does come down to leadership, right? And it comes down to decision making. That indecisiveness just flows through the organization. Nobody else can move, nobody else can go because they're afraid if they go one way and they get told to go another, and it really just screeches the whole process to a halt. And I think some companies, just by their structure, are affected, or this is a harder thing to do than others, right? And especially like hardware manufacturing, process driven, checklist, highly regulated organ, that sort of stuff is different than maybe like a software company or something like that.
Totally.
But what I've seen work is, first off, there has to be clear direction and clear vision. And I think too often leaders are scared to say, I don't know, right? They're scared to say, hey, look, this is how we're going to get the wheels turning, and we're going to head this direction. And this is generally, where we're going to go.
Yeah.
Here are the first 3 steps. I need you to go ahead, start making that happen. And then I'll give you, some final guidance. Instead, it's like if they don't have the whole problem solved from A to Z, then they just don't put out anything.
Yeah.
And this is a lesson from the military. We have what's called a warning order. So, as the commander, I would get a mission and I would say, oof, I don't wait till I have the whole thing solved and play. No, it's immediate, 15 minutes, right? Okay, what do I need to get out immediately? Get a quick meeting together, like, and this is sort of that, that quick immediate mission that you get down, like, hey, we've got a raid coming, we got to go get this guy, whatever. It's kind of similar to, in the business world, what we're seeing here, right? It's nobody saw it coming, and it comes out of the blue, and you got to react quickly and adapt. And so I see a lot of similarities between the two. When that warning order, the first thing you do is you say, all right, look, this is what we know, this is what we're going to be doing, and what I need you to do right now is this, right? Here's what I'm anticipating. I need you to go, check on, we're going to need ammunition. We're going to need vehicles. We're going to need that. And in the business world, it's like, all right, I know right off the bat, we've got half our workforce with desktops hardwired into the network. We need to find laptops for everybody. Check for it. Like, what are our, what communication systems are we using? We need to go, if we haven't set up Slack or some sort of, communication method, let's get that going. What about passwords? Like those things, no matter what the big plan is, those first steps need to happen. So get people working. And I think that the teams that did that have adapted well. And then, once you sort of get to that distributed team, things I see are, you need to really think about the systems, the trackers, the metrics you have in place. Yeah. It's kind of like a pilot who flies at night. Right? Like pilots, there's like 2 types of flying, right? During the day, the pilot's flying the plane and he's looking, there's a river, there's the mountain, there's the city. All right, I'm going the right way. You can kind of see how high he is and all that. Yeah. But then when they fly at night, they fly on instruments only. And that's what distributed teams are, right? Because you don't have that daytime stop by the office, water cooler talk going on. You're making decisions. How are my people performing? How are they feeling? How are they doing based on metrics you're seeing filled out and key performance indicators. And you can't just look and be like, Jill doesn't look right today. She looks, let me go pull her aside and see what's up. You don't have the benefit there. And so you need to really wire tight those metrics and start to kind of use those and fly by your instruments a little better. And then you have to over communicate. Because you have to over communicate and you have to have a system for communication. So whether that's a daily or weekly check-in, and the biggest thing, right, is we all hate meetings that waste our time. Yeah. Well, now that we're communicating virtually, it's a lot more unnatural to do that. And so you need to plan out your meetings, your one-to-ones and your group meetings even more. Have an agenda, put it out beforehand. I can say, hey, Sherri, I need you to, we're going to meet about this. I need you to come prepared to talk about these things, and
Yeah.
I'm going to come with these things. And that way you can be very efficient with your time. You're not wasting time in this sort of more unnatural human conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think those clear expectations and really planning how you're going to communicate and having clear expectations are so important. And then the final thing I'll say, because I kind of go on this, I really like this stuff, so I go on forever. But I'd say a really key thing to look at is, the title of that article that we mentioned earlier, I just had published in Nashville Business Journal here, is Adversity is a Gift,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I truly believe that, because if you think about it, when you're evaluating for promotion or for hiring or for any of those things, if you're just trying to train your people, what do? You have to sort of manufacture adversity, right? You have to say, okay, so pretend like this happens, or this client comes to you with this, or this happened to the market, or now tell me what you would do in this sort of make-believe scenario, right?
Yeah.
And then you evaluate them on that. Well, guess what? This is the real scenario, right? Yeah. This is exactly that. Hey, nobody in the interview was saying, hey, a pandemic breaks out, what are you going to do? Nobody's even going that far, but you're seeing it now. So I would tell people to be carefully evaluating, especially their junior leaders, right? Like those first line and second line supervisors and managers.
Yeah.
How are they adapting, right? Are they thinking on their feet? Are they bringing solutions to you? Are they able to independently solve problems, or do they have to are they coming back to base, right? They're coming back to you like, well, I'm just going to wait until Sherri tells me what to do today.
Yeah.
Right. Because,
and again, that all ties into culture. When you give permission to fail for yourself or others, then they're willing to take a risk. But when you come down, as soon as someone has a different idea and you come down, if it doesn't work, then how are you supposed to foster that willingness to try, right? Mm-hmm. So that started before, and maybe that's the difference between the people who are able to pivot and the people who aren't. They haven't fostered this idea of communication, because you know what? Communication is key in all relationships, including working relationships. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can't see maybe that girl by the water cooler that she's down, but maybe you could touch base. Hey, I know you're trying to homeschool 3 kids. How are you doing? Do you need flexibility? Or just even to have the open door policy of, if you're having trouble at home, just talk to me and we can figure something out. But when you don't give people the a big leash basically and let them creatively solve problems, then how are they supposed to when they're not tied to you, when they can't come back to the base?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point. I think being able to communicate intent and not have to tell people, all right, here's what I want you to do. A, then B, then C, then D, then Z, and then tell me when you're done. And then if they're away from you, if all of a sudden they get to C and it's not like you said it was, they're stuck. But if you could just communicate the intent, like, hey, this is what we need to accomplish. I think you could do it this way, but at the end of the day, as long as this thing gets done, we're good. And that is kind of a leadership skill in itself.
Yeah. Before this, I worked at a place as the director of social media. It was a nonprofit, and we had an office and everybody had their own job, and we didn't cross communicate. It's like everything got done and it was smooth. And we had a new office manager come in and say, well, what if something happens to you? Then what happens to our marketing team? I was like, well, it dies with me. So he ended up coming and he did a good job, and it was good open communication. We all knew what each other did. If something happened, we had a backup. And a few months before this whole thing happened, my partner and I spoke about the same thing. Okay, we are too independent. Everyone's too independent. We have to figure out, if something happens, where do we send the money to? Or so we started working in, and then when this whole thing happened, it was kind of easy. It wasn't super easy, and we are feeling the difference of not being face to face, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, well, what's going to happen with the banking information? It's just okay, it was easy to shift. But it was like you said, we didn't have the whole thing planned, and you have to be humble enough to be like, I might have this wrong. So I only know the 3 steps. I know we need to take 15. I only know the first 3. Let's try this for a couple of weeks and reevaluate. And that was a cool point that you said about that. So So if you had to choose like two things for someone to be a great leader, like two qualities, what would you say, okay, you have to have this and this?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would say if you're wanting to be a great leader, the number one thing is you have to really care about people,
Yeah.
right? One of my favorite sayings is you lead people and you manage systems. So leadership and management are two different things, right? So management is about efficiency, right? And
Yeah.
that could be a group of people being efficient. That could also be a electrical system or a plumbing system or anything else, right? It's just about maximizing the efficiency of that system. But what management can't do is increase uh, capacity or capability, right? You can't help someone who thinks they can only get to level 5, build skills and believe in themselves and realize no, you can get to a 9, right? Managers don't do that; they just become efficient. And so, but in order to really do that, it's about people, and if you're not genuine and you generally don't care about uh, the people that you are leading, and you're just focused, if your whole thing is just about the net profit or about the output, uh, in my mind, you're never going to be a great leader, because people can see that you're not being genuine with them. And
Yeah.
so great leaders have to care, and they have to invest in themselves and invest in others as a whole person,
Yeah.
not just about their output at the job, right?
Yeah.
You could be a good manager that way, but you're never going to be a great leader.
Yeah.
um, I'd say that's the biggest thing about other people. And I would say that the second thing, if I had to pick a second, it's you have to love learning.
Yeah.
You have to, because that learning, because great leaders are, in order to do that, you have to coach, right? Like, great leaders are coaches or teachers,
Yeah.
because you have to communicate them. I can have the greatest ideas in my head, but if I don't know how to tell you, and if I don't develop my own capabilities to do that, it's going to be rough. And in order to do that, you have to really love the process and commit time and energy to uh, developing yourself in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And if you don't love that process, I think you're just going to limit your your own abilities, your own growth, right? You can probably get by with a couple like-minded people maybe,
Yeah.
but are you going to be able to scale that? You're going to have to go from where you are now into where you want to be. And if you try to wait to have the skill set of leading a 100-person company to even start, you're never going to get there. You have to kind of step into the unknown and have that courage to go in, and have that love and commitment to say, the love and commitment to learning and development, uh,
Yeah.
and knowing you're going to do that along the way.
Well, when I think about the leaders, when I hear, like, think about the great leaders of history, or even just like great business leaders in the last 50 years, Warren Buffett or whoever, all these people are saying, no, I read like 50 books a year, or I read like 2 books a month. Like, they have a learning plan, or a book a day sometimes. They have like a plan in place so that they make sure they learn. Like, for me, when I actually like learning. Like, I went to school for fun as a hobby, because I was like,
Yeah.
just raising kids, and I was like, I may as well try it. So it
Yeah.
has
Right.
nothing to do with what I'm doing. It was just fun. So I've always enjoyed reading and stuff, and so it's kind of, for me, thankfully it comes naturally to enjoy that. I feel for the people who are like, oh, I'm not a reader, but now we have video, podcast, like, there's no excuse to not learn. Like,
Yeah.
especially
There
during
is
the
no
pandemic, how many
excuse.
times have we seen people just be like, hey, here's all my information for free on YouTube?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know why people, like, I'm like, spend an hour a week just learning from the best, because we literally have the opportunity. This is like the first time in history. People 50 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't have YouTube like we have it now.
No, I mean, and that's something that I try to impart, to, because I have my leadership coaching business, and I actually have a martial arts business with 3 locations around here. We do jiu-jitsu and MMA, and got employees there as well. And so
Yeah.
with my clients or with my employees, you know, every once in a while, especially on that side versus like the executive coaching, they're,
Yeah.
younger and that sort of thing. Uh, and, sometimes I'm like, all right, I need you to get this done. And then they'll get back, well, I don't know. Can you show me? No, like, because it's not about me just showing you and you replicating what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I need you to learn how to learn, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a skill in itself, right? How to research and find problems. That is a critical skill. And it's important to not just have that for yourself, but to expect that
Yeah.
of others. And so I'll give a kind of a funny example that happened with one of my young coaches. So we were going out to a town in eastern Tennessee, so about 4 hours away. And when there was a jiu-jitsu tournament, I was going to coach at and be at, and I was going to let one of my sub assistant coaches stay with us,
Okay.
as an example, in like an Airbnb. I said, I got an extra room, you can come stay. And but we were going to get there at different times. I couldn't leave till later, and so I'm driving, and I get there, and then I said, all right, well, we're getting close, so I'll meet you there. We're about a half hour away. I shoot him the address, and he was like, oh, I was supposed to go already. And and his roommate who works for me too said, yeah, like Sean's not going to spoon feed you. Like, he knows that you know how to get to Knoxville.
Yeah.
And he expects you to get to Knoxville, and then he'll tell you where the address is. You don't need to know the final point. Just start moving.
Yeah.
And it was like, he was like, oh. And so we had a conversation. We got there like that night, like that. It's not just about this trip. You need to think about this all the time. Just because you can't get a hold of me doesn't mean you sit around and wait for exact instructions. You know how to get partly there. I need you to figure it out and be proactive. And so I think imparting just that mentality to others in your organization is so critical, and enforcing and expecting people to problem solve on their own. Because and if you micromanage and you try to solve everybody's problems, you're going to hit that glass ceiling, and you're not creating you're not developing your student leaders, not developing capacity in the people within your organization, so that it'll free you up to do bigger and better things.
Yeah, exactly. It's a waste of time to sit and deal with everyone's little problems when they can try and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back to learning, I know for me, like probably a year or two ago, I was like, I love psychology, basically. So I'm easily drawn into psychology and reading articles about that or books about that. But I'm like, no, I need to grow and learn about other things. So what do you love learning about, and what would you suggest for someone like me, just something to learn? Because like that's what I love about TED Talks. It's like 10-minute talks on like any subject under the sun. So you get to start like learning about other things. So what would you say as a leader we need to be reading or learning about, or there's huge principles we can take from it and apply to our own businesses?
These are a great question. So I would say it's kind of funny, what I'm easily sort of drawn to in terms of, I guess, not as immediate to business, that I enjoy and I do get out of, but I have to sort of check myself, because I'm like, okay, Arsene, you're going, this isn't, you need to pull yourself back to like the immediate needs. I am a huge like policy nerd, like public policy, politics. And so I will get into that, and especially being deployed overseas and interacting, and I've worked with ambassadors and regional. So I just think that geopolitical stuff going on, I will, it's like the best soap opera on the planet. Like, you don't need The Bachelor, you just need to learn politics, because it's way more interesting, right? So that's the one thing that I kind of get behind, that I have, that is good to know, in my opinion, right? We have to be good citizens of the world and of the country, but I have to sort of track myself back sometimes and be like, no, we need to get to the nuts and bolts of what's going on. In terms of, I think, to answer your question, I think that what's more important than saying, everyone needs to learn or focus on this one thing. I think the important thing is to sort of have that introspection and say, where am I at now, and where am I going, and self-identify the skills that maybe, or the knowledge that you're you're not just even lacking like immediately, but maybe, hey, what's your goal for your business in 3 years?
Yeah.
Look at that. Now, in order to do that, right? Imagine you're there right now. What are you like? Oh, I don't know how to, set up e-commerce on my website. Oh, I don't know how to do a podcast. Oh, I don't know how to, I don't know anything about hiring and firing people or anything like whatever that is. I think it's about self-identifying um, for you. But to go back to your point about psychology, if we're talking leadership, if you're worrying about leading people,
Yeah.
I think that you need to focus on reading about kind of the psychology and sociology of people and developing that emotional intelligence. And but I do think the best way to do that is honestly you have to surround yourself with different types of people. Get outside your own echo chamber and try to, if you are, if you're sort of conservative and right wing, that's your, viewpoint, you need to start reading the great thinkers and the leaders of people on the other side of issues, of different races and ethnicities, and exposing yourself to a more global perspective, because, travel really is one of the only things that truly makes you richer. And so right now travel is a little more difficult, but you can expose yourself to those other thoughts and ideas. And as a leader, you need to be able to see other people's point of view and empathize with their opinions. And if you're the type of person that and I think this usually comes from people that get too much in the echo chamber, that sees the world in black and white. Like if you think there's a right and wrong answer to basically almost anything, you probably need to get outside that, because the world is gray and there's always two sides. And any hard issue, whether it's a political issue or whether it is a business issue or a business decision, both sides, there's probably more than one right answer. Right? If you could name any controversial topic, you could look at one argument and be like, yeah, they're kind of right. And you could look at the exact opposite side and be like, yeah, they're kind of right. That's why it's hard, right? And that's the same thing in business. And so I would just say exposing yourself to other viewpoints, other and people that have some different experience. So if you're a military guy, find and sort of veteran, go and whether it's maybe a more flatline organization, tech type startups, or just other groups that have a different background, is hugely beneficial. So you start seeing, there's more than one way to do this. There's more than one way to think about that. And I think that being able to have that more global perspective is one of the most important things you can do when you're trying to educate yourself and prepare yourself for, leading large groups of people or leading new ideas and thought leaders.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from everybody. So like I do see a lot of people who seem to only hear their like little small, and they don't actually converse with anyone outside their little bubble. But it's like, welcome to the real world, and travel is such a big part of that. And that's one reason I love traveling. Like on our honeymoon, we went on a cruise, and I was like, I would never do that again, because it was so insulated. Like I like going to countries and then experiencing the real food and talking to the real people, and then sitting there talking. We were talking before we started actually pressing record about how we shift our days. So like when I went to Israel, their day starts at like sundown. So they start with rest and sleep, and then their day, halfway through the day, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, and they go to work or whatever they do. And that's one practice I put into my business that I often talk about, is just like start the night before, list your work, go to bed knowing that as soon as you wake up, you're hitting the ground running. You're not wasting like an hour, like, oh, what problem do I have to solve, or who do I have to talk to? And I saw in one of your videos, you do the same thing. So how does that work for you? This is something I totally push on people all the time, like starting the night before. So I'm happy to find someone who does it.
I think it's huge. And it also, right, you sleep better, right? You can actually, turn off your brain
Mm-hmm.
and just relax instead of, oh, well, what do I have? And even if it's almost subconsciously or sort of in the background, it's still sort of, I find that I even, like you said, I sleep better. I get
Yeah.
better, more restful sleep because I know all that stuff's listed out. So yeah, my calendar, what I do is, some people use planners and more written, and some use digital stuff. And what I recommend is for your larger calendar to use something digitally, because it's just easy to replicate, right? Like, if most people's days, there's, every Wednesday at 2, whatever, there's
Yeah.
kind of there's things that you do repeatedly, and to have to write those out is sort of arduous. Now, if that's your process, that's fine, and I've seen it work for people. But what I personally do is I have that digital calendar that, I can also, long-term appointments that I'm going to forget. I want to make sure they're there, and you get these digital reminders, and just easier as connected as we are. Um, and then, so I have sort of my reoccurring stuff in there. But then what I have is I use like my written notebook, right, that I always have with me,
Yeah.
for sort of the day-to-day, the to-do list, the reminders that I always have that. It's just a little easier for me to write that down than have to get on my phone all the time.
Yeah.
And then sort of that night before is the time to synchronize the sort of the random thoughts and to-do lists with the calendar for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I can look at and say, oh, I've got time from here to here. What do I have down? What's my priorities tomorrow? And fill that in. And the other thing I recommend people do is on that big calendar is, set up, especially now, especially people that maybe aren't used to working from home, because I've been just sort of self-employed, work from home, working your company freedom for 5 years now. And so having blocks of time, and what I do is I actually separate my creative work from my non-creative work.
Yeah.
And what I find is, and I think a lot of people do, is the morning is when I tend to do my best creative work. And so I might have, I'm going to wake up at this time. I have, and scheduling everything. That's the other thing too, is when you are scheduling it before, everything needs a time.
Yeah.
And that includes eating, walking the dog, that sort of, whatever that morning routine is, you need that in there.
Yeah.
And so I start that out, and then I might have from, 9 to 11:30 creative work block. And that's blocked off in my calendar every Thursday from 9 to 11:30.
Yeah.
And that, unless there's an emergency, if someone says, hey, can we meet on Thursday? Because here's what happens otherwise is you go, oh yeah, I don't have anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of saying, oh no, sorry, I can't do it then.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell them why, but that's your time.
Yeah.
And so blocking out that work. And so then I use this night before to basically transfer within those work block times what I'm going to do and what are my priorities. So
Okay.
that's sort of the process I've found that works. And when I was, I was in the fitness and wellness business for a while too. And it's critical, right? Your mental, your physical health are absolutely connected. Anyone says different. You're never going to maximize yourself in business in your mind if you're not maximized or, healthy physically.
Yeah.
And what I've found, and I coach, people that were, and I teach my clients this too, that are multimillionaires, that are super busy, that have families and all that stuff, but they still do better when like they even program in their workout time ahead of time.
Okay.
And so they have these times from, 5 to 6, I'm going to gym, or from, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. I'm going for a jog. And you treat that like an appointment. That's a commitment to yourself, the same way it's a commitment, for me to be here with you at this time.
Yeah.
And so if someone says, hey, can you meet at this time? Oh, sorry, I have an appointment.
Yeah.
And
that's why the calendar is so important, because it's like, then you put that in. Like for me, at 3:00, I just need to stand up and start moving. I don't know. I think it's because my kids get home for 3, so I always had to leave work for 3.
Yeah.
Now my body's just used to moving at 3, but I'm like, from 3 to 4, you can call me. Probably won't answer. I don't have my phone. When the weather's nice, so like only 2 weeks out of the year I live in Canada. No, we're outside playing, because I'm like, I need to move and I need this break, and then I can get back to it. Or sometimes I'll work later in the night, but I just have like kind of a general flow of things where it's like, if I don't schedule some sort of movement, it's like, then I just have a really hard time working.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think moving and and to put on sort of my fitness hat again, but again, I try to take that world over into my leadership coaching.
Yeah.
is a thing I also recommend. I do personally, and it could be something really small, just walk outside for 5 minutes or something,
Yeah.
is you'll find, especially people that are working from home now, because it used to be maybe you used to, go somewhere and eat or do something like that, is you have a little bit of movement when you eat, is
Yeah.
after you eat breakfast and lunch, uh, don't sit right down and work right away, but get up and move a little bit. It actually physically helps you digest. It'll help that like as that blood kind of rushes to feed your meal, you get that
Yeah.
tired feeling,
Yeah.
and your brain starts not working as well. It'll prevent all that. And so that's another like little tip and trick that I tell people is, right after breakfast is when I go out and take the dogs out. And then right after lunch is now my wife's working from home. And so now that's when we go do our long walk, or we go where we do yoga, or we do something like that. We do it right after you eat is a great time,
Yeah.
just physiologically to get up and move. Because otherwise, right, you're just sitting here at the desk
Yeah.
for hours. You walk 10 feet away, grab food, come back to the desk, and then
Yeah.
you put there. And then by the time you've been sitting hunched over like this for 8 hours.
Exactly.
And, after a few weeks of that, your body's going to start to deteriorate, which means your mind's going to start to deteriorate.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, because I'm not actually a walker, like my husband and I play soccer once a week, and we
Oh,
play with the
cool.
kids. I'm like more of a like I'm not like a yoga, like calm and breathe. I just do something.
Yeah.
Not that I'm like super in shape or anything, but when I was working from home, I'm like, oh my gosh, like now I'm making breakfast, sitting down, eating and I'm not moving. I'm like getting 30 steps a day, because then after work I cook and then I go to my living room or whatever we do. So I'm like, because normally I park and I have to walk, I don't know, 100 steps to get into my office. And then I get up through the day to talk to people or to go to the washer or whatever I'm doing, or meetings. So I'm walking out to the parking lot, driving to the meeting. I'm like, man, the one day I looked at my steps, because I'm like, oh, I feel so restless and I'm not sleeping well. I'm like, yeah, because I'm not putting any energy out. Like, so the working from home, that was a huge, I'm like, now in my day, like, I'm like, okay, it's time for walking, whether it's after supper or whatever works for both of our schedules. Because
Absolutely.
I'm like, I can't literally, in real life, when I'm at my office, I do not sit as much as I do here. And just, oh, my back and stuff, it's just like, I need to move. So, and I've been hearing a lot of people say the same thing, like, oh my gosh, and they're working more hours, because like normally you leave your desk for lunch or you talk to people. Now, because we're at home, we're actually working more, which for me, I love it, because I actually love working. It's my own business. But for people who are just working for somebody, they're like, this sucks.
Yeah. Well, and my wife is a sales manager for a home delivery company called Postmates, which is really big, especially on the West Coast and here. But yeah, so she's got a 12-person team, and they're all working from home. And the hard part about their sort of job is it is sort of a tedious. It's a sales job. So her people they're calling people are getting told no all the time. It's a hard kind of mentally draining job, right?
Yeah.
Sales is. And I think this probably goes to a lot of different people that are in sales. Well, but the fun part was had that sort of fun techie culture. So they would like get up and play games, and they had a cool little recreation area and a Papa Shot, and think all that Silicon Valley stuff going on. So it was like a fun environment. So it was about the people and the code. That's what made the job like tolerable, right?
Yeah.
And then you just took all that away, and you're just left with this just mentally draining, worn down sales job. And so having to get creative about how to do stuff like that. And she's, she's here with me, so we kind of brainstorm on different ways to do that. But it's something little, like for their team meeting, she did like a home scavenger hunt. So they had to go find a chapstick and find that, and they had to find, there was like a reward, gift card she gave out to the person who found the things. And they did like a Zoom call, Top Chef competition, where they had an hour and everybody was on there. One person played music. And so they spent an hour, at the end of the workday, all making dinner and showing people what they made and got to interact. So you have to, if you get out of the routine, you have to replace it, whether it's with yourself or with your team. You have to be more deliberate. Kind of goes back to to sort of bring it back to where we started, just with your communication, with your meetings. Working distributed, working virtually means you have to be more thoughtful and more deliberate about almost every facet of not just your business operations, but about taking care of your people and culture, because a lot of those sort of things that just sort of happen naturally in human interaction aren't there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's this whole thing, even with my own systems. And I've been looking at my business and I'm like, wow, okay, I had some systems that were so inefficient, didn't know because it was just part of what I did. Or where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to try and take from this quarantine the best of the best. So this is now I'm trying to be more thoughtful because now I don't get face to face with my clients. So for one, the other day, I sent like this, it's a beer subscription for 3 months. He's going to get like 4 craft beers because instead of seeing them in real life and them just like liking me, I'm like, I don't want them to forget about me. So
Yeah.
like when everything gets back to normal, how can I make it? So it's just like I've been really thinking deliberately, okay, how can I touch base with people? How can I stay in their face without just like emailing, hey, hope all is well. So it's been really, yeah, it's been a lot more deliberate, which I think I'm excited to see like the new normal everyone keeps talking about. I'm like, you know what, this is good for business. I said it from day one. A lot of people were like, you're very insensitive. I'm like, no, my husband's home. We've lost half of our income.
Yeah.
It's gone. But I think it's a good thing because I'm back to like full circle, out of, hard times and adversity comes create a solution, comes like thoughtfulness and deliberation. And I just think it's this whole thing, we can view it half glass empty. It is what it is. We have no control over it. I'm viewing it as, man, this is the time to work on your business. What is working? What do you need to change? What are you happy that you had in place? So I think the whole thing is just a really interesting look, and I'm kind of excited to see what the new normal is for everyone.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
now's the time to think about these things. So any
Absolutely.
thoughts before we close out this conversation?
Um, I would just, tell people to, uh, I think you made me think of it when you just said it. Really focus on what you can control. And I would tell them, I'm kind of like that newsy policy guy, but I tell, all my clients, even some of my friends have been coming to me for advice, like you need to limit the amount of this going on and recognize that it is serious and you do want to be informed, and that's important. So find good sources for that. But in this quarantine time frame, you can really get yourself in a bad mental place and get overwhelmed, and recognize, while again, you need to find good sources, but these people are still selling ads, right? So they're not, if there is, just like all of our news, there is a little bit of sensationalism. They're still trying to get your attention. They're still competing for ad dollars.
Yeah.
And so just like anything, have that in the back of your head. Like anything you read, what are the biases? What is this person trying to do? And limit a little bit of that, and take sort of the approach that you're taking, which is, what can I do right now? And in terms of helping other people, not just outside your business, what can I do locally? Because that's really, I don't know, maybe you've got some clients that are affecting national policy right now, but I don't, right? And I'm not so, but all of us can make big impacts, with our family, with our communities, and with our businesses. And just like any major change in the market, whether it's, the internet or a war or, a new technology or anything like that, right? A natural disaster, any major shift in the market is an opportunity to adjust and excel. And some people are going to make the adjustment,
Yeah.
and they're going to come out of this stronger, and others aren't, and they're going to fail and be damaged by it. So that's going to happen. And it's 100% about your reaction to what's happening, not what's happening, that's going to dictate which side of that you're on.
Yeah, Charles Stanley says like this amazing quote, and it's, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react. And that quote is just like, it's a driving force in my life. I love it because it's like, there's so much we just can't control. Like, I don't know if people think they can control things, but 7 years ago, I was at my mom's house, started getting a headache, and then like within a couple of weeks was on my deathbed. That has changed my life because I'm like, I was in my safe bed and that went down. Whereas my husband went to Egypt for a mission trip and everyone's like, aren't you scared? It was during the revolution. I'm like, I'm scared, but I also could die in my own bed. Like, we don't have control over us. I'm like, be wise, of course, but we don't have control over things, people. Like, we really don't. So we just have to react to when properly. And you know what, in a year, it's too late to say, oh, I wish I spent more time working on my business. Why did I binge watch Netflix for 7 hours a day?
Yep.
This is happening now. Let's move, let's react, because things will get back to normal. I think people will be, for the most part, but it's like, you may as well go ahead of your competition and use this time as you can. So
Absolutely. Adversity is a gift, right?
exactly. I love it. That was a great article. I'll post it to my page.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And how can people follow you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so you can find me Stronger Leaders, StrongerProfits.com. The same username on Instagram, Facebook. I'm under Sean Patton on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And yeah, if anyone has any questions, and it can be bigger client stuff, or just, hey, what do you think about that? I really am just passionate about helping other leaders and entrepreneurs survive and thrive right now. So yeah, any questions, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. See you, Sherri.